Hi, welcome back to the Creative Writing Lab. I'm really happy to be with you today and to talk to you about the process of writing a novel using some of the insights and perspectives shared by an excellent novelist, Zadie Smith. In her essay collection, Changing My Mind. I don't know if you can see it. You can see it's well loved. I've had it for many years. In this essay collection, Zadie Smith talks about her experiences in writing novels. And I think that whether you have whatever stage of novel writing you're at, maybe you're just thinking about writing a novel, maybe you've started writing a novel, maybe you're in the middle, maybe you've finished one and would like to know what it feels like after. Either way, whichever stage you're at, I think that this will be really useful to you. So let's begin. So the essay that I'm going to use to discuss this is called The Crafty Feeling. It's kind of a transcribed version of a lecture that she gave at Columbia University's writing program. So the first thing she talks about is types of novelists. She says that in her experience, usually novelists are either macro planners or micro planners. So a micro planner, she says, is somebody who builds, if we think of a novel as a house, they build that novel floor by floor discreetly in its entirety. Each floor needs to be sturdy and fully decorated with everything in it kind of perfect before they go on to the next floor. So each part of the novel, each chapter, they write it from beginning to end, each one complete before they can move on to the next one. She goes so far as to say, she says she's a micro manager or micro planner. So a micromanager, she says, she starts at the first sentence of the novel and she finishes at the last sentence. It would never occur to her to sort of choose between different endings, which she says is something macro planners might have to struggle with, because she has no clue, she has no idea what the ending will be until she arrives at it. Macro planners, however, if we think of a novel as a house again, they have their houses largely built from day one. And then after that, their obsession is internal. Then they are not simply, it's still a struggle. They are forever moving the furniture, if we're still using that analogy of a house. They will move things within that structure. They'll maybe change a chair, a lounge, go back and forth between different floors of the house. So a macro planner will create the plot and the structure beginning to end, she says, before they've even started writing the novel. Right? So they will sit and plot the beginning, the middle, the end, perhaps what will happen in each chapter as well, what the main beats, what the main plot points are. I've known writers who are both. I remember I went to this talk and had the chance to kind of ask a lot of questions as well when the writer and entomologist, I think his name is Jeffrey Lockwood, let me check. Yes, Jeffrey Lockwood gave a lecture in Ames. So he writes these, as an entomologist, he brings that knowledge to his novels. He writes these wonderful crime novels that have bugs in them. They're really wonderful. So he says not only does he have the plot perfectly formed, he knows what has to happen in each and every single chapter. So that is perfectly planned as well. He also decides how long each chapter is going to be and what has to happen in each chapter, right? All of his chapters are about the same length. He says that writers feel comfort and readability and can move through the book more easily that way. And since he's already decided what the major plot points are going to be, these are the things that need to happen in each chapter. Once he has made those things happen, once he has hit that page count, then if he has room and if he feels that it's right, those are the moments for him where he can have play, even further imagination that wasn't plotted initially, and add things. So that those are two ways of doing things. I feel like I am both. I start out definitely as the way Zadie Smith is, a micro planner. I, in the beginning, am writing purely from feeling. I really related to what she said here. In the beginning, my writing exists, and I'm quoting her here, in the present moment, in a sensibility, in the novel's tonal frequency, line by line. She says, when I begin a novel, I feel there is nothing of that novel outside of the sentences I'm setting down. I have to be very careful. The whole nature of the thing changes by the choice of a few words. So I am not usually even very careful at that stage. I'm very anxious, but it's kind of a good anxiety. I'm really feeling my way into the novel. I don't have a plan. I don't have a plot. I'm chasing a feeling. I'm chasing kind of a prickling in my thumbs kind of instinct about what it's going to be about. After a certain point, though, after I've written a certain amount, then I know what I am reaching towards. I try not to plan chapter by chapter, plot by plot, even once I know, because I get easily bored. And so if I know exactly what's going to happen, I'm not going to be as excited while I'm writing. That discovery needs to be there. So after that first, let's say, first days, weeks, months of blindly feeling and writing and sensing and writing, I hit a point where I know what's going to happen. I broadly write those notes and I continue. And like a macro planner, like the entomologist I was talking about, I can go back and forth and write once I'm at that stage. If I'm writing chapter 3 and I suddenly figure out what's going to happen chapter 6 onwards until the end, I will go ahead and write them. I will go ahead and plot and write them as they come. So what's important about these distinctions isn't that you have to be one or the other, but you have to accept yourself as you are. If you are a micro planner and you try and make yourself outline and write that way, it's not going to work. Of course, try everything, but it's not going to work if you push yourself to do that. On the other hand, if you need that outline, if you write better with that outline and everything set already, go ahead and do that. But do take the time to explore which one you are. Okay, next. She talks about how much she has changed as a novelist from novel to novel. How she used to think initially that it was the duty of a novel to rigorously pursue hidden information, personal, political, historical, right? And however, from one novel to the next, she says she's changed so much that she doesn't recognize that writer anymore. And so she says, she doesn't say this outright, but I will. You must allow yourself to change as a novelist, not only in what you write about, not only in process, but also what you value, what you think the purpose of writing should be. It's sweet. She says that she was in an airplane once and she sat next to a young Portuguese novelist and she said, "Oh, I'm really looking forward to reading your first novel." And he said, "No, please don't." Back then I only read Faulkner. I had no sense of humor. God, I was a different person. And that's kind of true for each piece of writing, that you change so much in what you value. She says, for example, that she didn't have a sense of humor as a writer when she was younger, and her novels reflect that. Of course, I don't agree. I think her novels were wonderful, but that's how she feels. And so give yourself, as you read more people's work, your ideas about writing are going to change. Your values in the novel are going to change. The next thing she talks about is other people's words. So for some novelists, it's important that they don't get influenced by other novelists while they are reading. They will not read any novels. They will not read any fiction, right? So they need complete silence, she says, to tune their instruments. Others need lots and lots and lots of influence. They will come. She says she covers her desk in open books. She reads certain lines to swim in certain sensibilities and goes back and forth. She thinks of reading like a balanced diet. She says if your sentences are baggy to baroque, cut back on David Foster Wallace and pick up Kafka. If your aesthetic has become so refined that you can't even put a single black mark on white paper, stop worrying about what Nabokov would say, pick up Dostoevsky instead. I think that, so for me, I just become kind of less interested in, if I'm in a certain part of the novel, we'll talk about that part in a minute, I become less interested in other narratives. When I'm in the heat of a novel, of writing either a novel or a short story, it's been a while since I wrote a whole novel. When I'm writing in the middle of a short story, I'm really, really passionately writing it, then I don't have the space for other narratives. It's not like I'm worried they'll mess with my writing style. I can't invest in their narratives as much. What I really need then is poetry. I read so much poetry when I'm writing fiction because that's a good diet for my fiction. It helps polish my language, make it really compressed and really resonant. So you need to also, as a novelist and as a writer in general, understand that when you are in the writing, when you are in the process of writing, what kind of literary diet do you need? Okay. What she talks about next is the middle of the novel magical thinking. And for me, this is true of any big project, whether it's a novel or not. I'll read this out to you. By middle of the novel, I mean whatever page you are on, when you stop being part of your household and your family and your partner and children and food shopping and dog feeding and reading the post. I mean when there is nothing else in the world except your book. And even as your wife tells you she's sleeping with your brother, her face is a gigantic semicolon, her arms are parentheses, and you are wondering whether rummage is a better word than rifle. The middle of a novel is a state of mind. Strange things happen in it. Time collapses. You sit down to write at 9 a.m., you blink, the evening news is on, and suddenly 5,000 words are written, more words than you wrote in 3 long months or a year ago. Something has changed. If you go outside, everything, and I mean everything, flows freely into your novel. Someone on the bus says something, it's straight out of your novel. You open the paper, every single story in the paper is directly relevant to your novel. If you are fortunate enough to have someone waiting to publish a novel, this is the point at which you phone them in a panic and try to get your publication brought forward because you cannot believe how in tune the world is with your unfinished novel right now. Magical thinking, she says, renders everything possible. Incredibly knotty problems of structure now resolve themselves with inspired ease. See that one paragraph, it only needs to be moved and the whole chapter falls in place. Why didn't you see that before? You randomly pick a poetry book off the shelf and the first line you read ends up being your epigraph. It seems to have been written for no other reason. This is a real place, this magical place. I have been there. I miss it terribly. I haven't been there in a long time, but there is nothing like it. And it's true. It feels like you can not only draw inspiration from everywhere, it feels eerie how everything you encounter was created just to serve that piece of writing. I've truly been here, and it's fantastic. It's wonderful. I will say that this magical place is the reward of all the work that you did when you weren't in a magical place, all the work that you did when it seemed impossible to write this novel, and you kept trying to do it. You do reach this place. The next thing she talks about is scaffolding. So when building a novel, she says you'll use a lot of scaffolding. So let's see, what's scaffolding? I think of scaffolding as rules that one way to think about it is these rules that we set up for ourselves as writers that the work must follow. And you can be any kind of writer, right? Certain conditions that must be fulfilled, that you have decided must be fulfilled in that work. So she says that scaffolding holds up confidence when you have none. It reduces despair, creates a goal, however artificial, and an end point. Use it to divide what seems like an endless unmarked journey, though by doing this, you extend the distance you need to go. At the end, once you have finished the project, once the project is out of your hands, published, whatever its end result is, you will realize most likely that you didn't need that scaffolding, that project would have been fine even without those rules. But I think they're really wonderful, and I think scaffolding can be really useful. Any kind of structure, rules, anything that you can use to hold up your writing and give it a place to live, right, is good. This project that I did, Welcome to Iowa, Letters to COP and Other Immigrants, one of my main rules for it was that each piece of it would be about something that was not originally native to Iowa, that came to Iowa, either visits, something that doesn't live permanently in Iowa, which meant that part of this was nonfiction, which meant that there was so many experiences that I could not write about, could not talk about, so many people, so many things that I found interesting that I couldn't really include. But that was fine. That really turned out to make that project, I think, very lean in a good way, very focused. And even though it seems like there were some other rules too, those rules would be restrictive, I think that they gave me a certain kind of freedom. Remember though, there are other projects where I set up kind of scaffolding, and then towards the end, I took it down and said, they've served this scaffolding, these rules that I set up have served me as long as they could. Now it's time to free the work. So if you are very stuck, afraid, if there are just too many ideas floating, too many things you could do, and you don't know how to rein yourself in, what to focus on, set up some rules, decide that these are the only things I'm allowed to write about, or this is the only way I'm allowed to write. But remember, please take it down once it stops serving you, once you've got rid of that initial fear. All right. I think in the interest of time, maybe we do one more. We'll do two more. We'll talk about the last day, and we'll talk about stepping away from the vehicle. The last day of writing, the last day, the day you finish your novel. She says if you're a micromanager rather than a macro planner, the benefit is that the last day of your novel, because you're writing from beginning to end, everything is being perfected as you go along. The last day of your novel is truly the last day. You're not going to go back, because if you're a macro planner, kind of like me, you might half and half. You might have started in the middle, ended, and then go back. So the last line of the book is not the last line you write, but as a micro planner, the last line is the last line. It's the last day of you writing at least the first draft of this book. And so she says that it's a feeling of happiness that knocks me clean of adjectives. I think sometimes that the best reason for writing novels is to experience those 4.5 hours after you write the final word. The last time that happened to me, I uncorked a good Sancerre I'd been keeping and drank it with the bottle in my hand. And then I lay down in my backyard in the paving stones and stayed there for a long time, crying. It was sunny, late autumn, and there were apples everywhere, overripe and stinky. I wanted to share this because if you are struggling with a creative project, I think reading somebody's account of what it feels like to finish one is good encouragement, something good to reach for. Not just because you finished that great project, but the satisfaction, the joy, and as she describes, nothing can be better than those 4 hours right after you finished. And this is possible for you. This is possible for us. Reading this as I was kind of figuring out what we would talk about today, it really encouraged me to go back to work in earnest and put up with the miseries, the stresses of writing a novel so that I too could experience this happiness that would knock me clean of adjectives. Finally, she says, and I'm going to read this directly, "You can ignore everything else in this lecture except number 8. It is the only absolutely 24-karat gold-plated piece of advice I have to give you. I've never taken it myself, though one day I hope to. The advice is as follows. When you finish your novel, if money is not a desperate priority, if you do not need to sell it at once or be published that very second, put it in a drawer for as long as you can manage. A year or more, she says, is ideal, but even 3 months will do. Step away from the vehicle. The secret to editing your work is simple. You need to become its reader instead of its writer." And she talks later about how, as a novelist, she's seen other novelists do this. The book is published. It's done. Now they're reading for a huge audience. But backstage, they're sitting and scribbling, editing the finished, the published work that these people are waiting to hear after they've read it. This is good advice. Of course, it's so important to give yourself space that you can edit the book the way it needs to be edited so that you can really have that dispassionate distance and read it like a reader. You and I've talked about that before. Okay. I'm not disagreeing, but I have mixed feelings about this advice because I've done this where I finished a novel and another project that was sort of a collection, so another complete project. And I put them aside for over a year. And I think that was a bad decision. It's fine that it happened, but I think I should have published it right then, or sent it for publication right then, tried to get it published, both of those projects right then. Not because they're perfect. They are absolutely not. They are quite flawed. But because I was so young then, I was 22 or 23 when I finished the first one, and then 20, again, in my 20s when I finished the second one. Within a year of having written them, I had grown so much as a person, so much as a reader, so much as a writer, that yes, I could dispassionately edit them and make them better. But also within 2 years, the world had changed so much that I don't think there is a place for those projects as that version of me, that young person intended them to be. Within a couple of years, that writing, which at the time was so fresh, so evocative, so true to the experience of not only being a young person, but what was happening historically in India where I was writing, that it would have been right and correct to publish it then. One, because I will never ever be as unself-conscious as I was at 22, 23. If I'd published it then, it would have been a perfectly acceptable and pretty great for that time and place. Since then, so many people have published what would have at that time been fresh and new and something people weren't doing yet. Now people have done it. One, and then two, it's not reflective of who I am anymore. It's not reflective of the kind of writer I am anymore. That doesn't mean it's bad. It's just I can no longer put my name on those projects as they are. I could edit it now, and I am editing it now, but in some ways, those edits are not reflective of what that 22-year-old wanted to do, right? So please go ahead, and if you have those books waiting, give yourself enough distance to edit them and then send them into the world, I would say. Okay, let's end with a writing prompt. So today's prompt is, I want you to spend just a few seconds thinking about how you write. Do you first plan and plot what you're going to write, or do you just begin writing? Whichever it is, right now, for the next 7 minutes, I want you to do the opposite. If your normal is to sit and plot and structure and plan, do the opposite. Just begin writing. If you usually just begin writing for 7 minutes, I want you to plot and plan a novel, a story, whatever. Okay. I have my notebook. I am setting the timer. We can begin. I'm kind of shocked. I never outlined, like I said, I just, well, not at the beginning, and I just did and solved so many problems that I was having. Thank you very much. This was actually incredibly helpful for me. And I hope it was for you as well. Take care of yourselves. Have a wonderful week, and I will see you soon.